Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Maggie. Maggie, also known as Karis Maggie, is a content creator and cultural enthusiast. She creates content across her social media platform to celebrate cultures through history, ethnic food, and Creole languages. Nice to have you here today, Maggie. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm good. I'm good. I'm happy to be here and to have this conversation with you today.
Me too. This is a long time coming. I'm so
I
excited.
know.
I like to start each episode with the same question, which is what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
Ooh, okay. My first language is English, and languages that I've learned to speak are Haitian Creole, um, Jamaican Patois, I guess you could say I learned to speak, yeah. And we're dabbling a bit with French. I'm trying to be less rebellious and trying to pick it back up again.
Did you have to learn French when you were in Canada?
I took a minor, so that was the only reason to kind of like make sure my status as a international student like was intact. I pretty much did a bunch of like electives from my old school. They got transferred over, and so to fill the gaps, I had to like take some. I'm like, all right, let me take French. But surprisingly, it was like my last year. It was the only course that kept me going. Yeah, when you mix in like chemistry and bio, like the French, I was like, yes, I look forward to French class.
Mm,
Yeah.
I feel like between chemistry, bio, and French, you could have a lot more fun with French. Like you can play around more. Like you can't, there's no two ways
Definitely.
about chemistry. Like it either is or it isn't, you know?
Exactly. And funny enough, my reason for actually taking French was because I thought it would be easy for me to do because I knew a little Haitian Creole.
hmm
Wrong. I was
Oh,
very wrong.
it's different. It's really different.
So fun fact.
But we'll get into that in a little bit. Tell me a bit about growing up and what languages you heard in your household, in your community, and how your relationship was with those languages.
Yeah, so I was born in Guyana, but honestly, I can't remember any of my years there of what I heard or anything, but I moved to Jamaica at a very tender age, and that's pretty much when I can have some sort of recollection of languages that were spoken around me. Both of my parents are Haitian, so I was learning a mix of English and Haitian Creole because they kind of went back and forth with both languages when speaking to me. And then naturally, because I am in Jamaica, I was infused in the culture in hearing Jamaican Patois. So the first place we lived was like rural part of Westmoreland. So we heard it a lot. So not like your uptown, quote unquote, uptown Kingston, speaky spooky. like the real, like rural community, Jamaican Patois. So that was yeah, those were like the languages I grew up hearing a lot.
hmm How, okay, so I'm hearing Haitian Creole at home. I'm hearing Jamaican Patois and English outside of your home. And what was that mix of languages like for you at that age? Like I would imagine, especially when you're young, when like kids like to play with language and just kind of
Hmm.
make up their own words and express themselves, very individually with what they're learning and what they're hearing every single day. So like I'm hearing like two different, very different languages that you're exposed to every day. So, like, how was that like communicating? How was that, learning about yourself, learning about heritage, learning about the Caribbean in general? Like, what was that like through the lens of language?
Huh. Funny enough, I don't know, something about kids, we don't really think of it at the time. I would say I didn't really think about it at the time. It was just like it felt normal to me actually. If anything, everyone else seemed weird to to me in that it's like, oh, y'all only know that's all y'all know? Oh, boring. Um so with Haitian Creole though, it wasn't as I think it wasn't until I got to like maybe being a teenager or so that I do recall hearing it more often, like spoken in the household, like interchangeable with English. But I do remember when I was younger, my parents would like say Haitian Creole words so I understood. So if they were saying sit down, they would say it in English, then they said it in Haitian Creole. If they're saying eat, they would say English, then Haitian Creole. So that kind of like helped me to learn basic words. But honestly, I didn't think anything about it, to be honest. To me, it was just like normal. It felt like a regular reality for me. And my parents allowed me to express myself in both. So I would speak Jamaican Patois. I'll try and dabble a bit, learning Haitian Creole and saying some words, and then they would help me learn a bit more. But I think what helped me to learn the language more is like when we would visit relatives.
Mm,
That's when I started like, coming around and being like, okay, well, how do I say this? Because I wanted to really be able to communicate with like my cousins, my aunts, my auntie, and my grandmothers when I arrived. Like that was really important to me from even a young age. So yeah, it wasn't anything like special, I would say, or different to me. It just felt like normal, if
hmm.
I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't think about it till I got older, if I'm being
Mm,
honest.
yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that it just felt normal and it wasn't like you felt like outside, like different, or you felt like
Mhm.
ostracized or anything like that. Like it's just who you are. It's just this cool thing that you can do and you can communicate in that way. Let's start with Jamaican Patois. So I heard you say, you were living in I only visited Jamaica a few months ago, so I'm still getting familiar with like the parishes and what
Yeah.
they're called and where they are. But you said Westmoreland, right? Is that
Yeah.
what you said? Okay. So, talk to me about the patois that's used in that area of Jamaica. And I heard you say, it's not like the uptown um accent
Mhm.
or like the uptown way of speaking. And like, what is that? Why do you draw that distinction? Like, what does that even mean?
Mhm. So, I don't know if depending on where you're listening to the podcast, if you're watching it, if you're listening to it. So when I said uptown, I made sure to put like quotation because it's very much like still in today's society where the language is looked down upon. And so a lot of people who are like more from the city, they tend to like want to speak less Jamaican patois and they want to sound, more in their opinion, more quote unquote educated, right? So there is a certain way people start to sound when they go away. So they're still speaking like English, so Jamaican English with, Jamaican sounds, whatever. Like you're not trying to sound like British or anything, but there's a certain tone and a way how people start to speak whenever they are going towards that instead of patois. So, what I grew up hearing, like I was a lot of around a lot of like older folks, so especially from like the church. So I heard a lot of like proverbs. That was a big one that I remember distinctly. There are also certain words that were said I can't think off the top of my head because it's been so long, but there are just certain words that you would hear in the rural part of the countries that you would never hear in the city. And
Mm,
I think that's like common for like everywhere that you go. The more city like you go to, there are certain words and phrases, ways of expression that you don't hear anymore. So that shift when I did eventually move to the city, I picked up the difference real quick. I was like, huh, okay, so that's what you mean by that. And I had to explain, okay, well, that's what I mean by this. And then they could tell, they're like, oh yeah, country bumpkin. Like people could tell what part of Jamaica you're from just by the way you spoke, the type of Jamaican Creole you spoke, like certain phrases and words that you would use, or even pronunciation. If you moved to Montego Bay, which is where I lived for some time after I lived in Kingston, even the way I said tomorrow, like that was a dead giveaway that that girl had just come from Kingston. Yeah, even the way you said the word tomorrow. Because I'm trying to remember. I think in Kingston it's drawn out a bit more versus Montego Bay or vice versa. I honestly can't remember because I switch it up. Keep them guessing.
you know
Yeah.
what? You know why I love that you point that out because and I wanted to talk about this later, but I think it's a good time to mention it now. Like the Jamaican accent, the Jamaican cadence, I feel is something that has come to represent the entire Caribbean for people who are not of Caribbean descent, right?
Yeah.
And people who are not born in the Caribbean either. And it's like it's so not only wrong, but it's so shameful that I think that this island of people and culture and accents all get lumped into one really bad representation
Mhm.
in Hollywood, in movies and stuff like that. And I think that I'm glad that you brought that up because I think it's such an important thing to remember that, you know, there is so much diversity even though it's an island. It's like not everybody is the same, not everybody talks the same, not everybody like
Mhm.
expresses themselves in the same way and uses the same. And I think that people forget that. I think that people, I feel like our region just becomes like a punchline in a lot of ways, like
Yeah.
when people want to just imitate or have this kind of like,
Yes.
so I'm saying that to say I'm glad that you brought that up, and I hope that listeners can, understand that. And like the next time that they hear somebody who's not Caribbean, someone who's not Jamaican speaking in this kind of accent, I hope that they realize that, it's not okay.
Mhm. Yep, definitely.
Yeah. um, so that having been said, let's talk about, I know that you have a lot of you are a Caribbean gal. You have a lot of
Yes.
experience speaking to people, interviewing people, talking to people throughout the Caribbean. How do you feel, in your opinion? Like, how do you feel that Jamaican patois stands out amongst other patois in the region or other Creoles in the region? Like, what do you think makes it so distinct? And what makes it so uniquely Jamaican?
Yes, great question. There's a saying in Jamaica, them little but them talawa. So small but mighty.
Mm,
And I think the people are the ones who really drive that culture of Jamaica. So apart from, yes, they're known for reggae music. Yes, they're known for sandy beaches. Again, there are other countries that are known for sandy beaches and all of these things. And also, right now, I don't think reggae is as popular in Jamaica as it is in Europe, to be honest with you.
mm,
Um, so I feel like it's just that cultural pride that the people themselves have in the country. You will even see it in the comments. Any videos that are made, and people will be in there, oh, it must suck not to be Jamaican. How can you not wish you weren't Jamaican? Like you see it, like they literally clown. There's a fight, like little cousin or sibling fight that happens among Caribbean countries all the time. And one thing that all the other Caribbean countries will tell you about Jamaica is that they act like they're the only Caribbean country. And I guess there's a reason that
mm-hmm,
they do, because when you're thinking about countries that represent the Caribbean, they are one of the first ones that come to mind. People are always talking about how they visit. People can identify, uh, apart from the language, there are other things people can attach to it that makes it stand out. You have Usain Bolt, you have, or cannabis, Mary Jane, all of these things. So I really think it's the people who drive the culture because they're doing content. It's in patois. They have their music, to me, I feel like they don't try to be other people. They try to stick within their cultural root. And I think the only thing that's missing is making the language an official one.
mm,
Because at this point, it has been so recognized globally. It's in movies, it's in cultural, it's in music, all these different things. And so what is happening in the conversation now is that you do have a lot of people who have been waking up to realize that there's something special about the language. What they were told about the language was false. The notion of it's broken English or the language of the uneducated, all these different, stereotypes and myths. They are slowly waking up to that reality, and more people are speaking out that, yeah, we should have it as an official language next to English, because why not? And there's also the other conversation of it should just be called Jamaican. So remember that was a running joke on the internet too, where people would say when someone comes and say to them, speak Jamaican to me, and they're like, it's not Jamaican, it's Jamaican patois. But then if you really think about it, it's like, but why can't it be named Jamaican? Italian is the nationality of people from Italy, but it's also the name of the language. English is the nationality of people from the UK, but it's also the name of their language. French, you get what I mean? And so on and so on. So that has been a conversation. And I think for English based Creole languages in particular, that conversation is really being amplified within the Jamaican community,
Hmm.
that a lot of people want it. So I think it's really the pride of the people for their culture that puts them on the map, to be honest with you. Because the patriotism, the pride, it just, yeah, they go the extra mile. Let's just put it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah, I think that's great. And I didn't realize that there was that conversation about dropping the patois and just calling it Jamaican. But I love to hear that, first of all, but also it's really important because it kind of throws off that colonial, those years of colonial oppression. Because it, like you said, if Italians, if their language can be called Italian and French can be called, well, maybe that's not a good example, but yeah, French people can like,
Yeah.
their language is French.
Yeah.
Like,
And they're called French people. Yeah.
yeah, I think that Jamaican and having the language being called Jamaican just makes perfect sense. It's kind of like saying like we're here, like we're here, we're independent, we're our own people, we're our own sovereign nation, and this is what we claim. And I think that's amazing. Oh, do you know any details about that or not?
So I don't know the full detail. I know there's a lot of talks, especially with like linguistics, or linguists, sorry, who the conversation. I think what has been the setback for so long in why it hasn't been an official language is that a lot of people think that they're trying to advocate for monolingualism, and actually did a video with a professor who is a linguist, and she does a lot of work in this area. And the truth is that they are fighting for it to just be a recognized language beside English. So they understand
Mm,
the importance of English for the quote unquote professional environment, whatever. But when we really, really look at it, even in politics, entertainment, they use patois every time they're trying to appeal to the everyday people. They
mm-hmm,
literally go into it and they're trying to get votes from the young generation or whatever it is that they want to do to appeal to a certain set of people to be relatable. They go and they speak Jamaican patois. So I always find it very interesting when the conversation turns to, well, let's have it be an official language, and it comes up with this, oh well, it's not a real language, it's broken, and we need to have English, like, and it's like, but why can't we have both? We do
mm-hmm,
both on a
mm-hmm.
regular basis. But some work that I do know is happening. There are some creators, so I'm gonna shout him out. Creator of Chat Patois, so he has a YouTube channel where he teaches people about Jamaican. And one of the things that he does is also pushing for the name, recognizing that let's just call it Jamaican, right? So, in teaching people about the language, that's also what he teaches. And that's something as a creator myself, I am pushing to, also put out there as well. I think the trouble right now is when it comes on to SEO.
Mm,
It's like, if you want people to really understand what the video is about, sometimes I still have to tack on the patois on
mm.
it for the sake of the video. But in speaking to people, I have no problem with saying Jamaican or Jamaican patois, whatever the people want to identify it as. But I think the main goal right now is the conversation is really ramping up of let's make this an official language. So we're just keeping an eye out to see what the developments will be on that. But conversations are being had. So yeah.
I love that. I love that. I'm gonna keep an eye on that too because I think it's so important. It's so important. And I think one of the things I love about what you do and your content is that you specifically highlight the Caribbean. And I feel like I try to do that to the best of my ability too, because I feel like it's such a underappreciated. Well, that's not true because I think it's a very appreciated region. It's a very valuable region. But I think that a lot of the appreciation and value, it comes from the wrong places, or it comes from places that are not 100% authentic. So I
Mhm.
love the work that you're doing. I'm probably going to say that four more times before we finish talking, but I love the work that you're doing and the way that you continue to amplify Caribbean culture, language and food and people and all of that great stuff. So I'm going to keep an eye on that too because I really want to know what comes of that. And I think it could be a great inspiration to like other parts of the Caribbean to really embrace their
Mhm.
languages as well and push for that same change in their countries. And I hope to see that happen.
Exactly.
What are some very unique Jamaican terms or words, or like something that, if you see something written and maybe you don't know the person's like origin, but if you see this word or you see this phrase or something, it's like this person has to be Jamaican or they have to have spent time in Jamaica or, maybe
Ooh.
like, is there anything that, really, really hits you in that way?
Well, so I think it's more of right now, just with any other language, there are like what they call slangs that come up from time to time within a language. So as the language progresses, so I'm trying to think. Like your very common words, like the way we say to like eat, like nyam. I don't think I've heard any other Caribbean country that says nyam for eat. In context of telling someone so so. So I know that word I found out recently it actually has origin in Nigerian culture, specifically Igbo language, which means only, which blew my mind because in Jamaican patois, so means like only. So if you're saying, oh, you give him so rice, you can't give him so rice. So that's saying like you can't give them just rice. Like put on
Mm,
something else.
mm-hmm,
So things like that. The other things would be more of like what the older generations would say. Because another sad thing that's happening is the decreolization of our languages. In that they're going more and more towards English or towards French. So a lot of words that would have been said back in the day or sentences. So an example that I got from the professor who did the video with me about Jamaican patois was the way that they used to say river. It used to be river. Like
mm,
50 years ago,
mm,
yeah, it would be river. And then as we went along, it went to river. So
mm,
it's getting closer and closer to the English version. You get what I mean?
mm-hmm,
So it's it really depends. Sometimes you'll find people who grew up with their grandparents or, they're from the rural side, they still keep some of those words. What's the word? Kumuno? Mina ina no kumuno with you, or it's like saying I'm not in any mix up with you.
mm,
If you're
mm-hmm.
trying to say mix up, it's like little phrases like that. I'm sorry, y'all. The words are escaping me, but for the most part, I would say it's a mix of older terms that were used and a mix of right now there are like newer terms being used. So, ooh, chop. If they say me I go chop some money right now, it's like it could be two like references. It's either it's referencing to the scammers if they say they get chopped, like you got scammed,
Mm-hmm.
or you're saying you're working really hard. I'm gonna try chop some money. I'm gonna try get some money. So it depending on who's saying it, how they're saying it in the context, that's what it could mean. So those are like some of the new phrases I'm hearing. So I have to keep up also with the lingo because I don't live there anymore. So I'm trying to like keep up. I don't want to look like I'm out of touch. So there are a couple pages I'll follow to like keep me up to speed. And I'm still showing my age because I don't think that is even a very recent word, but y'all get the gist, to keep up to keep up with the culture. It's like listening to the songs, following certain pages. Like those are some of the ways you can realize different words that are being used to identify or recognize things today. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know what's funny? Something caught my attention in my like, my language antennas went off. So you said that river used to be riba with a B, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me wonder because I
Yeah.
know that there was Spanish influence in Jamaica for many years as well. And in Spanish, a lot of times the B and the V are pronounced similarly. Like, do you know anything about that? Like, do you know if that's maybe a reason, like why there was the B?
Mhm. So I don't know fully if
Mm-hmm.
that's the reason, but one thing that I was also told was there were a lot of different Englishes that, like there is not one set English that the enslaved people were exposed to as well. So when we're talking about people from the UK, like depending on where they're from, you hear how their accents differ, the
Mm-hmm.
way they pronounce words. So all of those two would influence the Jamaican Patois as well in how it's spoken, right? So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe for certain parishes in Jamaica, there was a specific group that they maybe came from Wales, and that's why certain words of how they say. Like that's my theory, I would say. But there also was, like definitely there's Spanish influence. Because even if they saying I, it's me.
Mm.
Yeah, it's all I know. It's a bunch of mix up that happen from different languages. Because again, it's like there were different enslaved folks that were brought from different parts of Africa, right? And now they have different languages that they speak, and this was the one they were exposed to. So one thing I have to mention that was told to me in that conversation I had too was because they are also exposed to different levels of English in terms of access. So those who are working on the fields would have different access to hearing English versus like the house slaves.
Mm.
Right. So
Mm-hmm.
even that would influence, and now you have children who are growing up in this. So it's a pidgin language that then develops into, what it is today. So yeah, I would say the common thing I've noticed with the story when you talk about Creole languages, they all have the same, history. But a lot of us I know right now are trying to find those connections to African words that are used as well to understand what languages they come from exactly, to kind of, connect the dots.
If you're enjoying this episode of Speaking Tongues, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts, and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. If you've been a longtime listener of the show or a recent listener, you can now pledge ongoing support for the show on buymeacoffee.com or on patreon.com. Talking about Haitian Creole, and I think like I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of people when they hear the word Creole, they think Haiti, they think Haitian.
Yeah.
And I think, and I think that's cool in a way. In a way,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not so cool because of the history that, Haiti has endured for hundreds of years. But I know that with this language, which is absolutely gorgeous in my opinion, like I love hearing it. I think it's such a beautiful language. As you were talking about Jamaican patois and how, there was often, some people who had a view that it wasn't a language or it wasn't a real language or, they didn't give it that respect. I know that Haitian Creole has its own journey with that as well.
Mhm.
And like, how have you been able to navigate that journey? And I guess what have you noticed from other people who speak Haitian Creole and people who are learning or maybe even reconnecting with their cultural language, with their roots in speaking the language?
Mhm. You know what's funny? It wasn't until I was maybe 19 or so that I knew that French was an official language also in Haiti. Because in my
Mm.
books, the official language has always been Haitian Creole because that's what I heard from
Mm-hmm.
my parents. That's what I heard from my relatives. I ain't never heard no French till I did French. So it definitely has its history because Haiti gained its independence from 1804, January 1st, 1804. However, it wasn't until 1987, I believe, that the language became an official language next to French. Now, that's a lot of time to be oppressed with not just the country, because they had occupations and all of that that happened along the way as well. But even just the language, for it to be the language of the common people and it not be officialized until like 1987 is not too long ago. So
It's like yesterday,
it's, yeah,
practically.
it literally feels like yesterday,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's it just shows to me also the fight that continuously has to happen, because we're still seeing it today. We talked before about, Jamaican Patois. They want to, or a lot of people have that conversation of making it an official language. Haiti has gotten to that point to do that. However, in some settings, there are still some people who look at as Haitian Creole as not enough either. There's still that notion of, if you want to be sophisticated, you pull out the French.
Mm,
You leave the Haitian Creole for at home, talk to the family, but if you want to show out, you speak French.
mm-hmm,
And I'm like, now wait a minute. Why can't we show out in Haitian Creole too? Like, come on now. Like, what's going on here? So that is also a thing. But I think it also has to do with how people are raised. If you're raised in a household that prioritizes that quote unquote prestige that they attach to French, then it translates into the person's day to day life and how they look at the language. For me, because I grew up hearing Haitian Creole all the time,
mm-hmm,
I had that pride in Haitian Creole from the very beginning. There was no question to me that it was a language or not. So as I'm continuing to learn as well, and I'm on this journey, I am meeting other people that they've expressed to me, I want to learn. What happened was that my parents didn't teach me, or I was ridiculed for attempting to learn. So language shaming, that's another thing. We don't have it as common in maybe English based Creole languages. Maybe we have it a little, but I find heavily, especially with Haitian Creole, there's a lot of language shaming that many like second, third generation would experience, because there's a saying that you'll hear whenever you attempt to speak Creole. You have relatives that say "sabladi, sabladi," which basically say, "What did the white person say?" Because yes, yes, that's the
What?
equivalent. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, sabladi. Like that's something that people would hear from family members if they attempt it, especially if they're not a quote unquote native Haitian Creole speaker. That is a phrase that very common that you'll hear.
Mm-hmm,
And so for a lot of people, having to show their worth, it's like even working on sounding as Haitian as they possibly can. So working on their accent, trying as much as possible not to sound Americanized, because this is very common among like Haitian Americans, right?
mm-hmm,
But yeah, like for me, I don't have no shame tree. So it never business and it never mattered to me. I'm like, I'm gonna attempt. I'm gonna sound really weird right now, but at the end of the day, my mission was, as long as whoever I'm speaking to can understand what I'm saying. And for the most part, I would say in my family, I wasn't ridiculed. Like they would joke around with me, but I wasn't ridiculed to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm never gonna try and learn this. If
mm,
anything, I was like even more um like I had more of a drive to learn it. So I would like start mimicking how they sound so I could sound as close as possible to them.
mm-hmm,
Right. So, and we see that too in English. People try as best as possible to switch the accent. So, actors who know how to do that, like, actors that they're like from England, but then they're acting in American movies and you would have never known they have an
I
accent. I'm
know.
like, that's a skill. I'm trying to be like that, okay? I can switch it up and they don't know that's the level I'm trying to get to, but
You know
it's
what's
whatever at this point.
I think it's so weird because there's so many British actors and actresses who have acted in, US productions and they have to have like a US accent and then you don't know, right? But it doesn't work the other way around for some reason. Like
Never. Like trying
Americans,
to be an American doing yeah, never. I
yeah,
don't know. I'm like, what is it?
I don't get it. I really don't get it. But I'm like, man, whatever the English or the Irish or whoever, whatever they're doing to make them sound authentic is like they need to share that secret because I feel like we're like embarrassing ourselves. Like
the amount of actors that I found out were actually British after all, I'm like, oh damn. I would have never known. Like every they got done the mannerism, everything to a
Mhm.
T they
Yeah.
got. So I was like, that's a skill.
Yeah, and singers too. Like there's so many singers who like I didn't even like, oh, they're English? Like they don't I don't know how one sings with an English accent, but I think that it's like you would think there's a way, right? But I just think so
Yeah.
many like British like
I don't know, man.
sorry to my British my English listeners, but it's all good. It's all love. Now, like I said before, you're hearing the word Creole and you're thinking Haiti, right? And I think
Mhm.
about like even when I think, well, not me, because I know better, but French spoken in the Caribbean, it's spoken in several parts of the Caribbean. And in your experience, when you've spoken to people who are from, the French speaking parts of the Caribbean, like, do you notice any similarities or differences between like, their language and the language spoken in Haiti? Like, how do they intersect and how do they
Mm.
completely differ that you've noticed?
Yes, I do. I think it was when I did the video with Dominican Creole and Guadeloupean Creole. I haven't done Martinique yet. I really want to, but I did notice like some differences in maybe the name for fruits. Also, we say moi for I. They might say mo. So that was something I noticed. So it's interesting because Dominica and Saint Lucia, they are two English speaking countries, but they
Mm,
have a French based Creole as well,
yeah.
right? And so I found both of them are very like similar to each other. So a lot of the things that they don't do in French, in their language, Haitian Creole might have it. So one example of a difference that I saw was the R. They don't use R's in Dominican Creole and St. Lucian Creole. So when they're spelling like the word Creole, it's spelled with a W. So instead of KRO YOL, it's KWEYOL.
Mm-hmm.
So Creole. Um if they're saying ears, so Haitian Creole it's Zorey. So that R Zorey. In Dominican Creole and Solution Creole, it's Zaway.
Ooh.
So the R's are replaced by W, and I can't remember exactly what was the reason they told me. I think it had something to do with not really being colonized by the French that long for it to,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think I was told. But yeah, both of those countries have a similar history. They were conquered by both the English and French interchangeably, and eventually one dominated the other, but for some reason they managed to still keep, having like a French presence in terms of having the French based Creole that they speak. And even that, you see how like very different it is. So I would say the differences I see is in that, and then the similarities is that all of the languages in terms of the sentence structure seems to follow along more of African languages structure.
Okay. I think I've said this before in a previous episode, but in my opinion, Creole languages are just alchemy. They're just alchemy. They
Yeah.
take very little
Hmm.
what we were forced to endure and how we were forced to communicate, and we turned it into gold. We turned it into
Honestly.
something beautiful. And I never get tired of digging into this and talking about this because I don't think people talk about it enough. And I just think like I love it so much.
I love it too. Yeah, so that was something I noticed. And then there are other French-based curls that, so going back to your point where you mentioned that whenever people hear the word curl, they automatically think of Haitian curl. I remember I was like that. So when I met someone who was from Mauritius that I was in a French class with, and when she's like, "Oh yeah, I speak Creole," I'm like, "Really?" Me now ready to speak to her in Haitian Creole, thinking we about to have a full-blown conversation, realize, oh no, Mauritian Creole has a Creole. Mauritius has a their own Creole as well, a French based one too. And it's different and similar in some ways. So I have a whole video too on my YouTube channel that really dives into the similarities and differences. But when we were realizing the areas that were similar, the way we were mind blown, we're like, we could definitely go to each other's countries and still use context clues in some ways and still communicate. Because the major differences, for the most part, was like with the personal pronouns or stuff like that. But everything else, like we don't conjugate. That's another thing I love about Creole languages. We're not. If I'm gonna say I'm eating, you're eating, it's the same. Mat manger, what manger. We're not gonna be having to conjugate the manger, mat manger or mat manger. Like, please, I'm about to bite my tongue. Please.
Nobody got time for
So
that.
everybody got time for that. Like, it's one word, please.
Yeah.
So that's one of the beauty and something I absolutely love. So it's like once you know what the verb is in the language, you can basically use context clues. Once you know what the pronoun is, you can use context clues to figure out what the other person is saying.
Hmm.
And it won't be that difficult because you all have like a base that's similar to work
Yeah.
from.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you, like, looking at the wider world of, Francophonie and of French-based Creoles and things like that. Like, I know in your series on YouTube that you've spoken to people from Seychelles, from Mauritius,
Mhm.
from
Reunion Island.
Reunion. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you, but you answered me like how, I was going to ask you about what you've noticed is similar and what you've noticed is different. And I guess I would ask you like when you had that experience with the girl in your class, I mean, did you listen to her and kind of like pick up and think like, oh, I kind of understand what she's saying, or I don't really, I have to think a little bit harder. Like, what was that process like? And I guess the same with, the Seychellois and the,
Mhm.
Mauritian Creole. Like, as a speaker of Haitian Creole, what was your brain doing? Was it like, let me pay attention and I'll get this, or was it like, oh yeah, I got 80% of that without even trying? Like, what was going on?
So funny enough, we didn't get to have like a full blown conversation at the time, but I do remember when she was saying, like, I asked her for some examples. This was like our first conversation, and I was like, okay, I don't think I would have known what that means because in Haitian Creole we don't say that, we say this. So a perfect example would be the personal pronoun. So I would never know she was saying I because they say mon, and in Haitian Creole we say moi. So it's like
Hmm.
little stuff like that. Once you break it down though, everything else, if she was to say bread, it's pain. It's pain is in Haitian Creole, it's pain in Mauritian Creole. So in terms of what is it, vocab is usually going to be the same as what it is in French, just different spelling for the
Mm,
most part.
okay.
But what gets different is the structure of the language. So I think specifically with Mauritian Creole, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head that I can remember, the way that their sentences were formed seemed more similar to how it was in French
Mm,
versus yeah. So like for us, the pronoun comes after the verb or something like that. And then it's the opposite for them where it's like however it is for French.
I
So let me see if
see.
I can think. Yeah. So it was little stuff like that I was noticing where it's like, okay, like I would need a little bit of practice to like pick up. But it's like if you get that breakdown from them initially, it will make it easier because again, you have that base of
Mm,
basic, French vocab that you can work with.
I
But
love it. It's like
yeah.
having a passport. It's like having a passport, Maggie. Like, you know?
Listen. That's my goal. My goal is literally to like, as I'm doing this, I want to eventually put it into practice where I can go to these places and like really see if I can understand while I'm talking to them, while they're speaking to me. Because another thing too is like just similar to Jamaican Creole or Haitian Creole, as I mentioned, as the language is evolving and certain like lingos or slangs are introduced based on the generation. That happens in Mauritian Creole too. So she even told me, based on the cultures that make up Mauritius, some of the words might be more of like Hindi words or like different languages that make up the country. So that
Yeah.
was also a difference. Whereas, for Haiti, it's like mainly Black African population of descent. So, yeah, similar to Jamaica, the descent is mainly African descent. So we're
Hmm.
not gonna have too many languages we have to drive like pull from. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In all of the work that you've done highlighting Creole languages and, your own exposure to Creole languages and Creole culture, what are some things that you've learned about this group of languages, and things that maybe you carry with you and things that you cause reflection, things that are, or something that you think people would find interesting?
I don't know if they would find it interesting. I think it's more of an emphasis on all of these languages have a very similar history that came from a painful time, but has evolved into something so beautiful. Um, the importance of passing down these languages is the best way for it to continue to live on, because a conversation that has also been happening among us Creole speakers is how some of the Creole languages are dying out. I talked about, like, the process of decreolization, where a lot of some of the English-based Creoles are sounding more and more like English. So Gullah Geechee was a perfect example. I should have mentioned that in terms of an English-based language, where as you're talking to people now, like the younger generation, they sound more towards English words versus using what it was back in the day, like what your grandma talked, right? So the importance of speaking to elders, I
Mm,
think, is going to be key as well, because some of us are also learning online. So whatever we are learning would be like the current, you know, this is how it's spoken now. But if we really want to trace back to, here are, the ways that it would have been spoken 10 years, because it's just like English. Back in the day, they say hath and thou. Like, we ain't walking around saying hath and thou. You get what I mean?
yeah.
So it's the same thing with the Creole languages. It's like over time evolving and going through a process. Some of it can be negative because, as I said, it's going less and less away from, that origin in the way the language was spoken, and just seeming like it sounded more and more like English. So, and that is usually what people use to kind of invalidate the languages when they say it's broken English. I believe it's because of things like that, because to them it just sounds like someone who doesn't really know how to speak, quote
Mm-mm.
unquote, the standardized English, and they're making attempts and it's just has an accent on the back of it. That couldn't be further from the truth. These languages have a story. We are doing our best to preserve them, to bring it back to to how it was before, to actually have people understand the words that were said back in the day versus now, just so people understand. I think it's harder with English based Creole languages because of that reason. With the
Hmm.
French based languages, they have a bit more, I would say, people are more receptive to saying, yes, that's definitely a language. But the English based ones, I've had people flat out tell me, no, I will never recognize them as being an
Hmm.
official language or being a legitimate language. It's just a broken English. But they will accept the French based ones.
Interesting.
If you know French, yes, you're gonna notice that French and another French-based Creole language is very different. Like, you can't use French to say you're gonna absolutely understand those languages. You can use it as I said, it's the stem,
Hmm.
but to really, it's a language. It's a different language. The structure, everything is different. It's the same for English, but again, because it's going through a decreolization process, as they said, people are not that receptive to believing that it is also a legitimate language. So they go with the notion of, yeah, it's just people who can't talk English. We're making progress in some areas, I would say. I would say there's more conversation to be had. So I think that's why it has been important for me on my channel, where I wanted to not only talk about French-based Creole languages, but also I was like, well, there are other type of Creole languages. You have English-based, you have Spanish-based, you have Portuguese-based. I wanted to bring those languages to the conversation so people also realize the legitimacy of them as well and just understand the journeys that they have been on, and none is better than the other, because that's kind of how it seems some of the conversation recently for some people has been going towards.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll get there.
We will. We will. I think as soon as people realize that like language is the power of the people, and
Mhm.
if this is your power and people are telling you that your power is not good or it's not working the way it's supposed to work or it's not, then if you have that in your brain and you walk through the world with that in your mind, like you can't do anything. Like you
Yeah.
can't do anything. It's so scary for me to think about because I can understand our parents, our grandparents having that thought because it takes a while to
Mhm.
kind of trickle down and for ideas to change, but like in 2023
Yep.
we're still
Younger than
lead
me and all.
we're still leading with this notion. It's like you're giving up your power. You're willingly saying, like, I don't care what my ancestors endured so that I can be here right now. I don't care what my foremothers and forefathers endured to make my nation a sovereign nation away from colonial
Mhm.
power. Like,
I would say I'm not going to allow a group of them who probably haven't yet woken up to the idea and truth of it to damper what we're trying to do in terms of educating and celebrating the languages. So even myself, one of the things I try to do in my content in terms of showing myself more, because once upon a time I rarely talked about myself and my cultural background. It was really just, here are the episodes I did, here's what we talked about, and see y'all next time.
mm-hmm,
So I'm opening up to the idea of that, and people say they like when I show both sides. So going from the Haitian Creole, and then I switch to Jamaican Patois, like they're like, whoa, like it catches them off, and it's just beautiful to see. So I want to be able to incorporate more of that, but also doing it naturally. Like, we're not trying to do gimmicks over here, guys. So
yeah,
it
yeah,
has to
no,
come natural.
of
So
course,
that video that it happened in, it was natural that it happened, and that was in one take. I'm like, all right, that's the video. If I have
yes.
to force it, like, nah, we're not doing that.
I know. Let's talk about, you're in Toronto. You're doing
Mm.
big things are going on in Toronto.
Ah, big things.
And I love that. I love that. I love that you're doing a lot in Toronto. And I know that Toronto has a huge Caribbean community. Tell us about that.
Mhm.
For people who have not been to Toronto or people who want to go and experience, like, who are we going to meet? What are we going to see? What are some of the festivals? Are we celebrating Caribbean style in Toronto? Like, how does it go down?
Yes. So actually, this year I was able to see way more festivals catering to showcasing Caribbean cuisine, and you were able to identify different countries according to the cuisine that they represented. So, for the first time, I had like a street food from Guadeloupe. I really liked it. I think it's called a boquito, or a bokit. It's like fried, and then they have filling inside of it. So this one that I got was chicken, really, really nice. Um, so I'm seeing more of those, because once upon a time, to be honest with you, when we talk about the Caribbean community, it was very hard to actually tell where people were from, unless it's we're talking about like the three loudest ones. I would say Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, even though some people still think we're not a Caribbean country, whatever. We are, by the way. So
I was going to keep my
um
mouth shut. I wasn't going to say a
just an FYI.
word.
But you could recognize a lot of these Caribbean folks because when you went to events, Caravana, I feel like, well, it's now called Toronto Carnival, is one of those events that you would go to and sort of start discovering. Oh, we have St. Kitts and Nevis people from. Oh, we have
Mm,
Grenadian. Those are the events I feel like I can recognize more of, okay, where in the Caribbean are you from? Because those three countries seem to be the main ones that you find. But there are others. I'm slowly recognizing that they're a bit quiet. Y'all need to be a little bit louder. Let us know you're here. Um, the
wave
other
your
thing too is
flag,
in the
wave your
food,
flag.
right? Wave a flag. Make we know you there, man. Another thing is in the food. I'm noticing more and more restaurants that are opening up. They're not just labeling themselves as being a Caribbean restaurant, because those you usually wouldn't be able to tell. Okay, which Caribbean country though? Am I gonna get Jamaican jerk chicken, or is this a Caribbean person who think they know how to make jerk chicken? Like, let's set the expectations from now. You get what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
So I found a Bahamian restaurant that does really good seafood dishes.
Oh
Shout
my
out to
gosh.
Nassau. Bahamas is, I believe, is the name of the restaurant. There's another one that recently came out. They represent Grenada, and they make the boil down, which is like the national oil down, sorry, which is
Hmm.
the national dish. I haven't been able to try it yet, but it's on my bucket list to go visit them to try
Okay.
it out. So you're seeing more. And then I mentioned the Guadalupean restaurant. So we're seeing more and more. We have a Haitian, two Haitian restaurants out here as well, even though the Haitian population is usually in Montreal, but they're here, they're just a bit
Okay.
quiet.
Okay.
So you'll find them. It's just specific events that
Yeah.
allow them to like show that Caribbean pride is when you'll be able to pinpoint, all right, this person is from St. Lucia, this person is from Dominica, this otherwise it's just boxed into Caribbean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not realize it's not called Caravana anymore. When did that happen?
I think
I feel so old.
how long ago? Because to this day, I still call it Carabana. I'm like, Toronto Carnival. I think
Not the
I don't
same.
remember how long ago, because I believe it would have already changed from before I moved here. But as I said, everybody knows that Caravana, so we still call it Caravana.
Hmm.
But the name change happened when they had a switch over. I think it's now the bank, Scotiabank, that's the persons who, yeah, it's not owned by the people anymore, I guess. Unfortunate. So, but yeah, so that was part of what I heard in terms of the name change and how
Hmm.
that happened. But yeah, it's a time to, summer, I think, is the best time to come to Toronto and really indulge yourself, because they have Jerk Fest. They have, as I said, I went to two other events that was Caribbean focused, around food, and you were able to actually know what Caribbean countries they were representing and supporting them and learning about their food. So yeah, it's getting better.
Mm.
Yeah.
Sounds like next summer I need to come up to Toronto and
Yes.
check out all the good
Come on a
food.
food tour.
Yes, and one of
Yes.
your food tours. I literally can't wait. I know that, well, I want to leave some time because I want you to tell our listeners everything about what you're doing. You're doing so much and you're doing such a great job at everything. I don't know how
Oh,
you
thank
have the
you.
time. I don't know how, like, you're so creative and you seem to have so much energy and you do everything so amazing. So I want everyone to know what you're doing. Tell us about your YouTube channel. Tell us about your series. I'm so proud of you and so excited that you have this series going. Tell us everything. But most importantly, please tell us where we can find you.
Wow, thank you so much. You can find me at Charis Maggie TV. So that's on all my socials, CharisMaggie TV. So I have a YouTube channel, which is where all of this journey started. On there, you'll find more longer form content. So if you want to see me geeking out, talking to people about their cultural background, specifically Creole languages, cultural history, things like that, you can find out on my YouTube. Instagram is more of where we have, shorter form content. I do other things. I show you my experiences going to events in Toronto, a lot of cultural events that I go to. Currently, the project I'm working on, it's called Kitchens of Toronto. So I did season one a couple years ago on my own, and it was just a way for me during the pandemic to highlight small businesses, but through my lens of showcasing food. And I wanted to showcase different countries that were represented in Toronto. So it has 6 episodes that represent 6 different countries. And season two, which we're working on right now, is going to focus on ethnic communities that have been affected by gentrification, any construction, and also the after effects of the pandemic. So when you're thinking of these communities, think Chinatown, Little Jamaica, Kensington Market. These are like the areas that the episode will be focused on, and really focusing more on the stories of the restaurant owners so people know the people behind the delicious foods that they are having.
Oh my
Yes, and
gosh.
I can't wait. I finished wrapping up the production and we're just in the process of like the editing and all of that. So next year, January is when it will be
Mm,
released. And yeah, I'm
oh my gosh.
excited.
I'm excited too. Where can we watch Kitchen? Is it on YouTube also? Kitchens of Toronto?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So the series is on on YouTube. And it's called Kitchens of Toronto. So if you tap that in, that is the only thing that will come up. I guarantee it.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that you're the first. I love that you are the one doing it because you're so unique, you're so creative. You give 100% with everything that you do and it shows so much. And I'm so happy that you're doing all of this and you're successful too. Like, yes, I love to see it. I love to see it. I will add links to all of your platforms in the show notes for this episode so that anyone who's listening will be able to click and get in touch with you and find what you're working on and watch you on screen right away.
Thank you. And thank you also for your platform, Elle. Like, honestly, you're doing an amazing job. I've been a fan of the podcast ever since I found it. And you are doing some really important work. So I just want you to know that, give you your flowers, and
Thank
just
you.
encourage you to keep it going because I have learned a lot through you as well.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm doing my best. I'm trying to make it look as easy as you look, but
But ain't nothing easy about content creation. So y'all, if you're listening,
yeah.
please
Yeah.
appreciate the
And you
tough
also
grind that goes into it.
yeah, you also have a platform that gives tips on content creation and entrepreneurship as well.
Yes.
So I'll make sure that I
Yes.
link those because I've learned a few tips from you on those platforms as
Oh,
well.
thank
Like
you.
you're
We have
really
a newsletter coming soon.
okay. I'll be sign me up or I will sign up however you want to do it. Maggie, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this conversation. I had so much fun. Always have so much fun talking with you.
Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, this is really wonderful, and I hope that people enjoy this episode. I know they will because it's us. That's why
It was a
people.
vibe. Yeah, it was a vibe.
Yeah, yeah. I like to end each episode with the same question, just to have a little bit of fun, kind of wind
Okay.
down. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Haitian Creole or Jamaican Patois to share and to teach us?
Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna do the easiest one. So this is in Haitian Creole. Creole parle, Creole comprend. So that pretty much means Creole speaks, Creole understands. So that's how we're all connected, all my Creole speakers. So regardless of which Creole you speak, if it's similar in some way, shape, or form, we're connected in some way. And let's just find ways to communicate, learn together, amplify each other, empower each other and our culture, because we all have something special to share with the
Mhm.
world.
I want you to repeat it, and then I want you to repeat it, and then I will repeat after you so that I can try saying it, and people
Okay.
listening can follow along and try with us.
Okay. I really hope I'm saying it correctly. So it's Creole Palais,
Creole parler,
Creole Copuan.
Creole comprendre.
Yes. So
Okay,
Creole speaks, Creole understands.
I like it. It feels very like formidable, like and the message that you shared
Mhm.
behind it too, like it's bringing people together, and it resonates. The
Yeah,
simplest way to
I've
say
always heard it, so
yeah.
it's the easiest way I can explain to people how much it means to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, before I let you go, really quickly, after you have been having a conversation such as this for quite some time, and you enjoy the conversation, and you're about to go your separate ways, in the first language that you think of, what is the best way to say goodbye?
All right, I'm gonna do the Jamaican one for this, Jamaican
Okay.
Patois. So I usually say like walk good or in the morrows.
Walk
So
good or in other
yeah,
morrows? Oh,
yeah.
I haven't
In
heard
the
that
morrows,
second
like
one.
tomorrow.
In other
Yeah.
morrows.
So maybe that's an example of like one that's slowly fading out. But yeah, in the morrows, or we'll link up later. Because as I said, like they're changing,
Mm-hmm.
as a younger generation, they have their way of saying stuff. But yeah, in the morrows.
So Maggie, walk good in other morrows. Hey,
Hey.
I will be talking to you soon. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.
New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers like ourselves.